what people like Isabella Green call the trap. In fact, the first book in a trilogy about this, the reveals, the latest one, the middle one is The Dream. The first one is actually called The Trap. And I'd not come across Isabella's information at that time. And the world, or the reality that I've seen as a result of this sequence, makes complete sense of the world that we live in, for me anyway, because, you know, I've traveled around the world a lot. I can't travel so much now. I'm banned from nearly 30 European countries and Australia. What have you heard? Must be something I've said. And, but I did for a long time. And what I saw was people, to say the least, not having a good time. They were struggling to survive another day. The lives they lived were incredibly challenging and often deeply unpleasant. And the kids were coming into the world, and their childhoods were the same, and all they had to look forward to was more of the same. And when I was looking at this, by this time I was absolutely convinced that reincarnation is true and real, a reincarnation of consciousness. And I thought, why would anyone come back here? Why would they? You know, I saw, you know, the various ideas that you come back to learn lessons and evolve, something I don't accept. And I mean, what are people in Gaza currently learning lessons about? And you see all this stuff around the world, and you go, well, learning lessons, right? What? How? To what end? And this is when information started to come to me in this synchronistic way, that first of all, that this level that we call the human world is a simulation, but then that what we call the afterlife, or that level of the afterlife, because we're infinite, eternal awareness, is also another level of the simulation. And that this so-called wheel of samsara, as the Buddhists talk about, is actually the recycling of souls, quote, souls consciousness, in and out of the simulation. And to what end? Well, we can get into that, because there isn't an end, I would say, and there is a reason for that, and it's nothing to do with evolution. And that it's a simulated reality, and as a result of that, it's not natural. It's not something that's just happened. Some intelligence has created it. And that started to make more and more sense of what I was getting in this synchronistic way from about the mid-1990s, that this human reality is actually manipulated by a non-human force operating outside of human sight. And what I have concluded more latterly is that that's what created the simulation. And so the next question I was asking, of course, is why? Why would you create a simulation? And from many and various sources came this theme, which is that these entities, which are actually representative of a very distorted, chaotic, psychopathic consciousness, were feeding off low vibrational human emotion and thought, because it's mainstream science that every time we feel emotion, every time we think, we're generating a frequency that is related to the nature of the thought and the nature of the emotion. So from that point of view, these entities, this consciousness that operates through these entities, has no interest in this world being joyful, being happy, being loving, being peaceful. It wants us in states of emotion and thought that relate to the prime emotion of fear, and related emotions like resentment, regret, anxiety, depression, and so on. And it starts to make sense of the world that we live in and why we have this world of such suffering, chaos, and despair and deprivation for vast numbers of people, when we're told by religion that it was created by a loving God. And, you know, when I've looked at this, you know, all these holy books, whether it's the Bible, the Quran, whatever holy book it is, there are some great lines in them. Like, I mean, in the Bible, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It's a fantastic line, and there's lots of great lines. But within these holy books are extraordinary contradictions of that. I mean, the Old Testament God is not a nice bloke, right, in the way it's described. And the thing is, once you sell the idea that these holy books were written by God, as you perceive God, then God can't be wrong. And if God can't be wrong, somehow you've got to square the circle of these contradictions, these great lines, and these massive contradictions of the great lines. And so you get this chaos, this perceptual chaos, and you get priests and imams and all these people desperately trying to explain why what's happening in the world is God's will. But if you seek control of your own mind, your own uniqueness, your own perception, then what you do is you take a step back from this and you take the good lines and you leave the rest. But what's happened since, of course, is that more and more mainstream scientists, there's one in the paper in the UK today, who are talking about the fact that it does look like it's some kind of simulated reality. And what I found is if you go down that road, a lot, if not all, of the mysteries of reality and the world would start to disperse because they suddenly start to make sense. For instance, what I got in this intuitive download, whatever, just after the millennium, is that this is a simulation, and the speed of light is the limit of the simulation, what I would now say limit of the simulation at this level. And in April 2021, I remember there was an article in Scientific American where an academic had concluded that this is a simulation, and that the limit of it, he didn't say at this level, but there are other levels to it actually, was the speed of light. And he related the speed of light to like the computer speed, the speed of processing, the processing speed. And that was the limit, and that's why the speed of light appears to be the fastest speed, when actually beyond that, it's actually pedestrian. But if you seek control of your own mind, your own uniqueness, your own perception, then what you do is you take a step back from this and you take the good lines and you leave the rest. But if you don't, then somehow you have to explain how someone you say is a loving God has created what we see in the world today. And indeed, not just today, Jeff, but right the way through what we call human history. And the simulation created to entrap perception. That's what it's all about. Entrap perception, entrap a sense of reality, to generate events and responses to those events by incarnate awareness, to generate this low vibrational emotion. It all starts to make sense in a way that is not making sense when you think a loving God has created this mayhem. All right, you look around and you see enormous differences in what different people believe, different religions believe, and their rituals and everything. But what I'm looking for are the areas of agreement where the themes, despite all the differences, are basically the same. And what I found is a tremendous common theme among religions, but also ancient cultures. I mean, I've talked to shamans around the world, like Credo Mutwa. I spent in the South African Zulu community. I spent hours and hours, days and days with him, going through the Zulu legends and accounts. And you look at the Gnostic Nag Hammadi texts, you look at the Christian belief system and the Islamic belief system, and you find these common themes that relate to a non-human force operating in the hidden, manipulating human society, a negative force, actually a psychopathic force. And so there are two levels of this, I would suggest. There's the consciousness that is driving the behavior of entities that are manipulating human society. And there's the entities themselves. So in Christianity, the consciousness is described as the devil or Satan. And the entities are described as demons. In Islam, the consciousness is described as shaitan or iblis, and the jinn are the entities. In the Gnostic belief system, the consciousness is described as Yod-Beoth or the demiurge, and as you rightly say, the entities in the Gnostic belief system are called archons, Greek for rulers. And I've found this in ancient societies that have passed that knowledge through to present day, and the theme is the same. So I think we're looking at two things. We're looking at this state of inverted, chaotic consciousness, which is operating through different levels of form. For instance, if you are operating outside of the human world in what's called the astral, then you are in a more, not as much as people would believe, I would suggest, but you're in a more ethereal frequency state than you are in the dense frequency state of human. But you're still in a form. You're still in a sense of being an entity, and that behavior that you then exhibit is dictated by your state of consciousness, and this Yod-Beoth consciousness, as the Gnostics would call it, is seeking to infiltrate and manipulate the consciousness, thus the behavior of all these different entities on all these different levels of the simulation, not least the human one. And so what we call psychopaths, and this consciousness is deeply psychopathic. They are seeking to infiltrate the human mind, the human consciousness, so we become it. And if you look at the traits of a psychopath, the top two are having no ability to have empathy for those that suffer the consequences of their actions. And I call empathy the fail-safe mechanism of human behavior. And if you don't have empathy, then anything goes because you have no emotional consequence for whatever you do. And the other thing that is missing with a psychopath is compassion. And when I then looked at this network that I call the global cult that manipulates this network of global secret societies that operates like a web, what I see exhibited by the people running that are exactly that. You cannot do what they do and impose upon the world what they impose if you have empathy. You can't do it if you have compassion. And, it's like if I program something into this computer and I press enter, it will not have an emotional response that says, but what's the impact on others of me doing this? It will just do it. And in that way, what we call the archons, these entities, are very computer-like, very AI-like, in the sense that they operate almost as a machine, as a system, rather than an entity with compassion, with empathy, and with any kind of emotional morality. As I've moved through the gears, through the levels of awareness, it's made sense of why the world is as it is. And the other thing that I've obviously asked about is, okay, what the heck is this simulation? What is it? What form does it take? And if you fuse together the esoteric, the far out, if you like, not really far out, but and you fuse it together with the scientific as we perceive science, there are many, many areas that actually come together. For me, for instance, we are in a simulation that is not a construct, it's a information source. And we are decoding that information source into a sense of reality. And what's decoding it is this, the human body. I've been calling the human body since the 1990s a biological computer. Instinctively, that term was coming to me. It's a biological computer. And what is also interesting in terms of the biological is that we perceive the technological to be technological, machinery, whatever, and we perceive the biological to be natural. My question is, how do we know that? How do we know that the biological is not a very advanced form of technological? And I do know, having researched this for 35 years now, that this cult, they look upon the biological as a form of technology, a form of computer system. And what I'm saying in the books is that the simulation is like a Wi-Fi field. It's like a radiation field of information. And we are basically the computer that is decoding that information into a sense of external reality, which is actually going on in here. So if you look at mainstream science, they talk about the five senses. The five senses are how we lock into this simulated information source. The five senses are picking up vibrational information. The ears are a classic with sound waves, but they're picking up this vibrational frequency information. They then turn it into electrical information, same information, different form, which they then communicate to the brain. And the brain, I say, decodes it into a digital holographic state, which we perceive to be outside of ourselves, but it's actually happening in here. And it's very much easier now to describe these things because we have the analogies. This whole technological explosion that's going on of AI and computerization, all of it, Wi-Fi, means that we can have the analogies to describe what we're talking about. Because what I've seen over the years, Jeff, is that this technological explosion is technologically mimicking the way that we are interacting with this simulated reality. And so you have the body, which is constantly decoding the simulation and delivering to us a sense of reality. And if you then liken that to the computers that we know about and the Wi-Fi we know about, what is happening is, if there was Wi-Fi in this room, I think there is in this hotel room, you would look around and you'd say, where is it? Where is it? You can't see it because it's operating on a frequency that we can't perceive. But the computer can lock into that Wi-Fi field and it can turn information in that radiation form and it can put it on the screen in a totally different way. Because if you said to people, okay, tell me about the internet, they would say, okay, well, it's moving pictures and it's graphics and it's words and it's all this stuff. And yes, it is. But the only place the internet exists in that form is on the screen. Everywhere else, it's electronic circuits and Wi-Fi fields. And when you sit here now and I'm looking at the screen, where is that decoding taking place? It's not taking place here or here. It's taking place inside the computer. And in that way, I'm saying that it absolutely mirrors the way that we are decoding this simulation into a form that appears to be outside of us. I'll grant you that. It does seem like that. But it's actually in here. And so when you go on the internet and you look at these video compilations of people that put headsets on in virtual reality games, and they might be in an empty room or there might be someone filming or whatever with them. But when they put the headset on, you'll see that their perception of reality is transformed virtually instantly. They're screaming, they're shouting, they're falling off their chair, they're running away. And all they've done is put a headset on. And what has the headset done? What do the gloves do in the more sophisticated virtual reality games and the audio? They are tapping into the same five senses, I say anyway, through which we are decoding the simulation. And they override those senses into it with a completely different reality. Now, with a headset, and I say this what we call the human body is the equivalent to a headset. Seriously more advanced, man. When you have a headset on, you can go like that and go, just a game. But when the headset is your body, which is delivering this reality to you by decoding the simulation field, you can only take the headset off when you, quote, die. And, this is, for me, what death is. It's simply a transfer of attention. That's all it is. Because we are consciousness. We are what is experiencing the world. This is the vehicle for that experience. So when the body ceases to function, quote, dies, it ceases to decode the simulation. And as it ceases to do that, your consciousness is no longer being delivered this sense of reality. And it's an interactive reality. It's affecting us, but we can affect it. It's suddenly in this situation that you have heard described so many times in your shows, where people are, or consciousness is in a completely different reality. And for me, all that's happened is that the decoding of this level of the simulation has ceased to happen, and it's freed consciousness to be in another reality. And that other reality is what we immediately call the afterlife, or the spirit world. And I say that's another level of the simulation. And what I'm not saying is everything is a simulation. I'm saying this simulated reality, different levels of it, is actually tiny, like a end of a pin compared with infinite reality. But the idea of this trap is to entrap consciousness so that it leaves the body when the body expires, goes through this wheel of samsara and comes back in another form to continue the loose production. And so when people or consciousness leaves the body and what I say takes on the soul level of perception, it's just another level of the simulation. And if you move to a higher level of awareness that I call spirit, then that's out of here.